Rob, we've got to do a club. And the reason, as he gave it, and I'll never forget this, why they were doing this club with Tony, was it'll be a really good way to get money out of Factory. How bloody wrong he was.
They were in a state of shock still about losing their lead singer. You know, it took them a good few years, if at all, to get out of it. Oh, hang on, they were a bit dazed. We'll open up a nightclub. You know, we'll spend a bit of their money on a nightclub.
We did have nowhere to go, and Rob came up with the idea of why don't we open our own club? Well, that seemed logical. I suppose maybe it was a way of, you know, affirming that we were going on, that we were moving on. Maybe it was Rob and Tony thinking, right, we'll show the world. We might have lost him, but we'll show him we're still a force to be reckoned with, you know.
The Factory gang had a new art project. They rented an enormous yacht sales room in the city centre, gutted it, and with architect Ben Kelly, created their kind of club. They called it the Hacienda, a situationist reference to utopia. When it opened on 21st of May 1982, a taste of hip Manhattan hit a bemused Manchester.
It was a complete fucking mistake. About 2 weeks before we opened, someone said, "Who the fuck have you built this for?" The kids. And they go, "So, have you fucking seen the kids recently? They're all wearing long fucking raincoats and huddled at the back of rafters. Yeah? You built a New York fucking disco. Oh, right."
It was like the bloody post-punk equivalent of the Millennium Dome. It was not going to happen, you know. It was just a ridiculous folly.
I mean, I remember going and thinking, where's the glitter ball and the... where's the DJ and the, you know, flashing lights and stuff? Oh, we're not having it like that.
It was cold, it was minimalist, and it wasn't very welcoming. It was free and the sound was appalling. But it was, you know, it was straight, it's like an airport hangar. It was horrible, but it was great. It's something about it. Oh yeah, we got in for nothing, that's what we liked.
It was better than going to your crowded local pub, you know, with a load of balloon heads. You know, you could go into Manchester and go into this massive space and there'd be like 4 people over there, 3 people over there, 8 people over there.
It was ostentatious, it was too big for the city, and it was style over content, all those kind of things you could level a Factory. Well, not strictly true, but the Hacienda was that. It was Factory Records in bricks and mortar.
The club had a catalogue number, FAC 51, and was built with profits sitting in Factory's coffers, profits generated by Joy Division. New Order became equal partners and investors in the club. At least that was the plan.
Rob said to me once in the club, he said that the walls are papered with money. That's the way he put it. The walls are papered with money.
I found a piece of paper that showed our investment for 82 and 83, which was £662,000. And I can't even imagine where that money came from. It must have come from Joy Division. It certainly wasn't New Order, because we only just started. I used to work there for money. I used to do backstage security and loading the gear in for a tenner a night, because I was so poor. And I found out years later that Hacienda was losing £10,000 a month, which was our money.
In the first year of the club, when we were losing like 50 grand a month, we were open 7 nights a week because we thought it was a public service. Oh, just stupid.
But Manchester in the 1980s was still a city in dire need of investment. Young people didn't have the expectations or aspirations that the Hacienda was already selling.
The winters were long and foggy and cold, and there was no outside stimulus to keep you interested. So I think people turned in on themselves, you know.
Your option was go and work in a factory or go on the dole. There was no options. There was no money in Manchester. There was no opportunities.
Tony kept his day job, and Tony had never worked in the music industry, and Tony was in charge of things, but it was in charge of something he'd never, you know, as far as I know, he'd never been in charge of a business before. Rob, you know, quintessentially managing Joy Division New Order. Rob hadn't managed a group before, so he was not in music management. I was just in the process of graduating from art college, so I'd actually never done anything professional before. But we sort of knew what we wanted for ourselves.
My dad always used to say to me, "What's Tony Wilson doing about your tax?" And I used to say to Tony, "Tony, what are you doing about our tax?" He'd say, "Oh, it's sorted, your tax is sorted."
Anarchy seemed to work for us. It seemed to be working. Why should we change it, you know? Why should we get an accountant in? Why should we get a lawyer in? It's working great.
But it wasn't working. Not in any traditional sense. Not as a record label. It didn't want to. That was the non-business plan.
You had no press department, you had no promotions department, you had no one pushing the record. You used to just make it, and make a, you know, someone would make a glorious sleeve for you, and it'd be this artifact, really.
One of the jokes at the time was factories don't release records, they let them escape.
Yeah. Factory Records got a really fantastic catalogue, which when you go back and listen to it, it's got loads of great gems in there. Bands like Section 25, amazing, you know, it's not just Joy Division, it's the smaller bands that make it really interesting.
When we went into the studio to record for Factory, they didn't put any conditions on what we recorded. The only thing that, it was the artwork had to have the Savile treatment. It's a beautiful object, but it was so expensive to produce, even to the extent that the inner sleeve, which was a marbled effect, we had to pay a licence every time one was made to a company in Italy, wasn't it? Didn't lose money, but...
No, we never lost.
Lindsay
used to work in the office. She once told me that we'd never, ever lost money for Factory.
Not promoting was brilliant. In a world where everyone's promoting and you're not, you stand out a mile. And suddenly, it became old hat. And I had a young band called Stockholm Monsters. I couldn't sell a copy of their record and felt very, very bad. And for the first time in my life as a record company, which I've been doing for 2.5 years, I was cold.
Too cold or austere to sign Manchester's newest success story, The Smiths.
I was pretty obsessed with Stephen. I thought he should be our new playwright, our new Dostoevsky. I think my relationship was done something of a disaster by the fact that he'd written a play about eating toast in Newham, and I lost it.
The Smiths slipped through Factory's gates and signed with a London independent label, Rough Trade. But Wilson's partner, Rob Gretton, didn't want them anyway.
Because your demos are fucking shit. This is a band who was wandering around Manchester going to everybody, the Smiths are the new Beatles, but your demos are shit. Do a new demo and then we'll sign you. So I think Morrissey thought, fuck off.
Because he'd done Joy Division in a way, because he'd done what he'd done, sensibilities like Morrissey would not want to go with Tony Wilson. You know, it would just be wrong. Their versions of the city are so separate, they're so distinct, it's so different that they could just never work together.
By now, there was a serious dissent on the Factory floor. In-house producer Martin Hannett thought the company should build its own recording studio, but no one agreed with him. He later sued Factory for unpaid royalties. The company gave his lawsuit its own catalogue number, FAC 61.
Hannett's commitment to Factory was to make great records. It's all very well having your fun and giving catalogue numbers to stationery, but what you really need to back all that up is great records. And to an extent, that was Hannett's job.
As far as I was concerned, it just had a lot to do with my budgets, you know.
which suddenly vanished down a hole in the ground called the Hacienda.
He felt, quite rightly, that the factory should open their own studio because they're a record company, and if they opened their own studio, within one album, you'd have paid for the studio. And he was absolutely 100% right. But we didn't open a studio, we opened a nightclub.
Bernard Sumner took over producing some of Factory's records, including a New Order single that transformed both the group's popularity and Factory's fading image overnight. But not their respective bank accounts.
Blue Monday, the biggest selling 12-inch record of all time, 12-inch single of all time, lost money on every single copy because the sleeve was so expensive to manufacture, it lost money.
Peter Saville's sleeve for Blue Monday was constructed like a computer floppy disk, one programmed for self-destruct.
Unprecedented sales and this astonishingly expensive sleeve.
It had a fantastic big hit single that was losing the money the more successful it became. But I love that, that's fantastic.
The single climbed the charts, losing money on every sale. Inevitably, Top of the Pops came calling. New Order agreed to appear, but only if they could perform live in the studio. Something that had never been done before.
The other funny thing was that the record went down because it sounded so terrible on TV. It was classic.
How does it feel when you treat me like you do?
Our record went down every single time we appeared on Top of the Pops, whereas everybody else's record always went up because we sounded so bad.
I thought I was mistaken, and I thought I'd heard you speak. Tell me, how do I feel? Tell me now, how do I feel?
I think we actually kept very much to our punk ethics right the way through New Order. You know, our attitude was very punky, and Factories was as well, which was what was, you know, great about it.
I remember Bono coming over to Rob. Rob and I were stood there at the end, and Bono came over and went, I really, really respect you for doing that. I really, you know, wish we would have done that. And Rob just turned around, pushed his glasses on, and went, well, why the fuck didn't you then?
Pickering managed live acts at the Hacienda and had an uncanny nose for talent, booking many of the biggest bands of the early 80s way before they became famous.
One or two came back and, you know, rewarded our loyalty to them, but not many. Funny that, isn't it?
In 1985, Pickering staged a stiff Chiswick-style Battle of the Bands. Competing that night was a little-known local group that would give the Factory experiment new purpose and meaning. They called themselves Happy Mondays.
You had one band that was just like Culture Club, another band that was like Haircut 100, another band that was like Madness, and then us. And, you know, we was pretty shit. You know, we couldn't really play. And, of course, when the votes came in, we was last. And when Tony announced it, we'd won it. So that was a great thing about Tony. It's like, fuck what they voted.
Is that true? You were last?
Yeah, absolutely true, yeah. The truth.
It was rigged?
Of course it was rigged. I think about 10 or 15 junkies turned up to watch us. All because they could get in and black beer and rob the handbags off the students.
House music from Detroit and Chicago found one of its first homes in Britain at the Hacienda. In 1984, DJ Mike Pickering created Nude Night at the club and ushered in the age of the rave.
We made it cheap to get in, The door policy was there was no door policy. Everyone could get in. Within like 3 weeks, we had 1,600 people in a 1,200 capacity place.